asking you now to make an analysis, to look at the Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, in the light of these three things. Just these three things. Was he truthful? Was he deluded? Or was he a liar? You could do that by reading his life, but it's very interesting, and since I don't have time, obviously, to discuss many aspects of this, I would just like to propose to you two things, just two things I want. First of all, it's very interesting that, of course, there is a long history of polemic against Islam. There is a long history, started with Saint John, I probably wouldn't like to call him a saint actually, but John of Damascus, who wrote the first polemical work against Islam, and he said some pretty absurd things, including claiming that the Prophet Muhammad died by being attacked by a group of pigs. That's what he actually claimed in his writings. And he pretty much set the standard for quite a few Christian writers after his time, making pretty absurd accusations. And of course his claim is that Muhammad was a liar. Why did he say this? And why, by the way, almost entirely, and I wouldn't say everyone, the Reverend Boswell, for example, is an exception, and there are others who take a different view today. But I mean, historically, probably up until 100 and 150 years ago, almost without exception, most Christian writers accused the Prophet Muhammad of being a liar. The reason they did that is very simple. Any Christian or Jew who opens the Quran and reads the life of the Prophet Muhammad will be struck by how much consistency and similarity there is between what the Quran says, what the Prophet taught, and what they know from their own religion and scriptures. In fact, some of these things are very detailed matters of theology and philosophy, religious philosophy and law. In fact, some early Christians thought that the Prophet Muhammad was actually a bishop, a former bishop. That is the level of information they recognized, because they have to explain, where did Muhammad get all this information? Where did he learn about heaven and paradise and the hellfire and Moses and Jesus and Abraham and Noah and the detailed dietary laws and so on? Where did he get this information from? Well, he must have learnt it from a priest, from a rabbi, from this and that, and then he must have what? Made it up and invented it and made this religion together. That's the only way they could explain, and still obviously not agree that Islam was the truth, by saying, well, he must be a lie, he must have invented it. And it's very interesting that there is another group of writers, and these writers are much more modern, and people who have now accessed themselves to the sources and have begun to read for themselves about the life of the Prophet, in other words, not relying upon these Christian polemicists. And they said, well, we don't really find evidence from the life and character of the Prophet Muhammad that he was a liar. In fact, it's extraordinary. His people used to refer to him, even before he was a prophet, or he claimed to be a prophet, as they would say, they used to refer to him as Al-Amin, the truthful and the trustworthy one. And they give many examples of his behavior, of his character, totally out of character of a person who is a liar. In other words, they testify to his truthfulness, his honesty, his absolute sincerity, and that they say it's not possible that he was a liar. They say, but he must have just thought that he was a prophet. He must have really believed it. He believed it, but he was, epileptic, and people who have epileptic fits, they have these visions, and so on and so forth. And so they tried to explain this by saying, well, he was deluded. He thought he was a prophet. That explains his sincerity, that explains his behavior. But of course, he wasn't speaking the truth any more than the liar was. But they can't reconcile his character with being a liar. But the interesting thing is, you can't be a liar and be deluded at the same time. That's why there's only three possibilities. And I'll give you an example. If you are a liar, if someone comes and asks you a question, as it happens a lot in the Quran, A lot of the time they ask, it says, the Quran says, they ask you, oh Muhammad, they ask you about this, they ask you about that. And then the Quran gives an answer. So imagine this, someone comes and asks the person, we're going back to our people, imagine here, remember, you need to know what's behind that door. So they come and ask a question. Let me test, let me see if this person really knows this. Now if you're a liar, what are you going to do? You want to give the right answer. So if a rabbi or a Christian or he's coming to you, what would you do? If you've got your source of information, you want to give the right answer, you're going to either construct a very ambiguous reply, or you're going to go back to your source of information, and you're going to find the answer and then deliver the answer. It's a lie, it's a deception. If you are deluded, you think that God is going to reveal it to you. You don't need to go and look for a reply. You don't need to go and search out the answer, because you're really sure that God's going to tell you, because I really believe I'm a prophet of God. Do you understand how you can't be a liar and be deluded at the same time? Yet actually, if you try to look, where is the source of information? There were no priests, there were no rabbis, there was no one we can identify from where the prophet could have got this information. His character, as we know, and we can examine it, was the character of a truthful person. I just want to give one example. One example, and it's from a vigorously authenticated source. This is an amazing example, and I just leave it for you to ponder on it. After many years of the Prophet preaching his mission, suffering incredible hardships, difficulties, seeing his beloved wife Khadija of many years die after a boycott, having seen his followers tortured, killed, forced into exile into Ethiopia, the Muslims suffered terrible things. Eventually a group of people in a city called Medina invited the Prophet Muhammad and his companions to come and live there. And it didn't stop. Even then they were gathering armies to try and wipe out the Muslims. So you can imagine, this is going on for now, let me see, by that time, must have been nearly 18, 19 years. And in Arabian society, it's very, very important, it was important in those days to have a son. In fact, they used to mock the Prophet Muhammad because he didn't have a son. He had daughters, but all his baby boys died. And it was a source of mockery of the Prophet from the pagan Arabs. Actually, what happened was, after these 17 years, he had a son. There was a son from one of his wives, Miriam. She gave birth to a son. His name was Ibrahim. And when Ibrahim was 6 months old, a little baby, he died. Actually, he died in the arms. The Prophet was holding him as he died. So this child died in his arms. And even the Prophet was crying. And they used to think that, you shouldn't cry when someone dies. And, they said, oh, Messenger of God, you told us not to do this. They said, no, this crying is from compassion. It's not from disbelief in God or questioning God. It's just from compassion for that child. That's allowed. Anyway, it's not the point. The point is that on the same day that his son died, there was an eclipse of the sun. So his son dies. On the same day that his son dies, there is an eclipse of the sun. Now even today I've told some people that, and I didn't even finish my story, and they said, that's amazing, he must have been a prophet. Right? And sure enough, by the way, at that time people came running out. They said, look, even the sun darkens for the death of the child of the Messenger of God. This is what the people were saying. Now imagine this, please think about it. If you're a liar, you've been inventing all these years, trying to persuade people you're a prophet and this and that, here's your chance. I mean, okay, your son's died, but still, after all of this, you'd say, you see, I told you, everyone. Didn't I tell you? Didn't I tell you? Look at that. What more do you want? True or not? Wouldn't a con man, a liar, wouldn't he take an opportunity like that? No doubt. And imagine if you were deluded. You're just a madman. You're just thinking and imagining the same thing. You'd say, yes, it's a sign from God. You see, I told you I'm a prophet. God's sign. But actually, the Prophet Muhammad did not do that at all. In fact, when he heard the people, he called them. He called them, the big announcement. You know what he said? He said, this is the sun and this is the moon. And they are just two of the creations of God. And they don't eclipse for the birth or the death of any man. So when you see this, pray to your Lord. And then he taught them a special prayer to make when there is an eclipse. Is this how a liar would behave? Is this how a deluded person will behave? Or is this the words of a truthful man? I can only ask you, please, to think carefully.